The wind howled through the cracks in the wooden walls of the small cabin, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant snow. Inside, a single candle flickered against the darkness, casting trembling shadows across the rough honeyed beams. Sylva Morrill lay upon a bed of straw and wool blankets, Music her long copper hair matted with sweat, her emerald eyes wide with pain and fear. Outside, the villagers of Valmere had gathered, their voices low and uneasy. They clutched crude crosses carved from oak and whispered prayers to saints whose names had been spoken in these lands for generations. Something was wrong. The birthing had taken too long, and the sounds coming from within the cabin were unlike any they had heard before. Sylva was 23 winters old, a woman known throughout the village for her gentle ways. She had lived alone since her mother's death 3 years prior, sustaining herself by gathering herbs, tending to wounded animals, and occasionally helping the village healer with difficult cases. The children loved her because she told them stories of ancient forests and singing streams. The men respected her because she asked nothing of them. The women trusted her because her hands had saved more than one fever-stricken infant, but none of them knew her secret. Sylva gasped as another wave of agony tore through her body. Her hands gripped the wooden frame of the bed, knuckles white. The midwife, old Helena, with her wrinkled face and clouded eyes, worked frantically, murmuring prayers under her breath. "Something is not right," Helena whispered, her voice trembling. "I have delivered 100 babes, girl, but this is unlike anything I have known." Sylva could barely speak. Her vision blurred, and in that haze of pain she saw him again. Abner. His face appeared in her mind as clearly as if he stood before her. Sharp features framed by medium-length black hair that fell across his forehead, pale skin that seemed carved from marble, and eyes that shifted between the warmest brown and the coldest crimson. He had been beautiful in a way that frightened and entranced her. 3 seasons ago, he had come to her door during a storm unlike any Valmere had ever seen. Lightning had split the sky, and thunder shook the earth. When she opened the door, there he stood, soaked and silent, his dark cloak clinging to his tall, broad-shouldered frame. He had asked for shelter in a voice that resonated like distant music bells. For 3 full moons he visited her, always after nightfall, always when the village slept. They had spoken of things she had never discussed with anyone, the loneliness of being different, the weight of secrets, the ache of existing in a world that did not understand. He had touched her with a reverence that made her feel like something precious, something sacred, and then without warning or explanation he had vanished. Now, months later, she was paying the price for that impossible love. Helena's scream shattered Sylva's thoughts. "Mother of God," the old woman cried, stumbling backward. "What is this? What have you done, girl?" Sylva's vision cleared enough to see what lay in the midwife's trembling hands. A baby, a perfect tiny human child with pale skin and eyes the color of a winter dawn. The infant cried, a sound so pure it seemed to pierce the very air. But there was more. Beside the child, still connected by the mysteries of birth, was another creature, small, no larger than a rabbit, covered in fur as white as fresh snow. It was a wolf cub. Its eyes, barely open, gleamed with an intelligence that music did not belong to any natural beast. The cub did not cry. It simply watched, silent and knowing. Helena dropped both infants onto the blankets and backed away, making the sign of the cross repeatedly. "Demon," she shrieked. "Witch, you have lain with the devil himself." "No," Sylva whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please, they are innocent." But Helena was already fleeing from the cabin, her screams alerting the villagers outside. Within moments, the door burst open. Men with torches poured inside, their faces twisted with fear and fury. Father Chryson, the village priest, pushed his way to the front, his gaunt face pale beneath his hood. He stared at the 2 infants, and his expression hardened into something cold and merciless. "Abomination," he pronounced, his voice echoing with authority. "This woman has consorted with unholy forces. She has brought forth creatures of darkness into our sacred lands. By the law of God and the church, she is condemned." "No." Sylva tried to rise, but her body was too weak. "They are my children. They have done nothing wrong." Silence, which one of the men shouted. Others joined in, their voices rising in a chorus of condemnation. Father Crispin raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent. "You will be cast out from Valmere at first light. You and your offspring. If you are ever seen near this village again, you will be burned. This is the mercy of God." Sylva's heart shattered. She looked at the two tiny beings on the blankets beside her. The human baby, so fragile and innocent, and the white wolf cub, its small chest rising and falling with each breath. Neither of them had asked to be born. Neither of them deserved this hatred. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Have mercy. They will die in the cold. That," Father Crispin said coldly, "is God's will." The men left her there, locking the door from the outside to ensure she couldn't escape before dawn. Alone in the darkness, Sylva gathered her children close to her chest, the baby on one side and the wolf cub on the other. She wept until she had no more tears, and then she simply held them, whispering promises she did not know if she could keep. "Music will protect you," she murmured. "I swear it, no matter what comes." Outside, the wind continued to howl, and somewhere in the distant mountains, something ancient stirred. Dawn broke over Valmir like a blade of ice, music cutting through the gray sky with pale, merciless light. Sylva had not slept. She had spent the entire night wrapped around her children, listening to the baby's soft breathing and feeling the warmth of the small white wolf pressed against her side. The cub had not made a sound since its birth, but its bright, intelligent eyes watched everything with an awareness that seemed far beyond its hours of life. When the door finally opened, Father Crispin stood framed in the doorway, flanked by 6 village men carrying clubs and torches. Their faces were hard, carved from the music's same unforgiving stone as the mountain peaks that surrounded their valley. "It is music time," the priest announced. "Gather what you can carry. You have until the sun clears the eastern ridge to be gone from our lands." Sylva struggled to her feet, her body still weak from childbirth. Pain shot through her limbs, but she forced herself to stand. With trembling hands, she fashioned a sling from her shawl, securing the human baby against her chest. The infant, a boy, gazed up at her with eyes that held the color of morning frost. She named him in her heart Aryan, for the silver light in his gaze. The white wolf cub she wrapped carefully in a piece of cloth and tucked into a leather pouch that hung at her side. The creature did not resist, seeming to understand that survival required silence and stillness. "Where am I to go?" Sylva asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The mountains are covered in snow. There are no villages for 3 days' journey in any direction." Father Crispin's expression did not soften. "That is no longer our concern. You made your choice when you lay with darkness. Now you face the consequences." One of the men thrust a small bundle at her, a loaf of hard bread, a water skin, and a thin woolen blanket. It was not enough to survive even a single night in the wilderness, music, and they all knew it. "Go," the priest commanded, "and pray that God shows you more mercy than you deserve." The villagers formed a corridor leading away from her cabin toward the forest edge. Men, women, and children she had known her entire life stood watching with faces of stone. Music, some looked away in shame. Others stared with open hatred. A few of the children cried, remembering the kind woman who had told them stories and healed their scraped knees, but their parents pulled them back and covered their eyes. Sylva walked through that corridor of judgment with her head held high, though her heart was breaking. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her despair. At the forest's edge, she turned back one final time. "I pray you never know what it is to be cast out by those you loved," she said quietly. "I pray your own children are shown more mercy than you have shown mine." Then she turned and walked into the trees. The forest was ancient and deep, its towering pines laden with snow that had not melted since the first freeze 3 months prior. The ground was treacherous, hidden beneath layers of ice and dead leaves. Sylva's bare feet, wrapped only in strips of cloth, grew numb within minutes. The cold bit through her thin dress and cloak music like teeth. She walked for hours, following no path, simply moving away from Valmir as quickly as her weakened body would allow. The baby Aryan began to cry from hunger. Sylva stopped beneath a massive oak and tried to nurse him, but her milk had not yet come in properly, and the child's cries only grew more desperate. The white wolf cub emerged from its pouch and climbed onto her lap, pressing its small, warm body against the baby. Miraculously, Aryan calmed, his tiny fingers grasping the cub's soft fur. The two lay together as if they had always known each other, as if they were two halves of the same impossible whole. Sylva wept then, not from despair, but from a strange, fierce love that overwhelmed her. These children, born of a union that should not have been possible, cast out by the world before they had even opened their eyes fully. They were hers, and she would die before she let them perish. As the sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of blood orange and deep purple, Sylva realized she had made a terrible mistake. She had walked deeper into the mountains rather than toward any possibility of shelter. The temperature was dropping rapidly, music, and she could see her breath forming clouds in the air. The baby had stopped crying, which was more frightening than his tears had been. He was growing cold, his lips tinged with blue. She found a hollow beneath a fallen tree and crawled inside, pulling the thin blanket over all three of them. It was barely enough to block the wind. She held Aryan against her chest and the wolf cub against her side, sharing what little warmth her body could provide. "Abner," she whispered into the darkness. "If you can hear me, wherever you are, please. I do not ask for myself, but our children, they are innocent. Please." The night deepened. Snow began to fall soft and silent, covering the forest in a fresh blanket of white. Sylva felt herself growing drowsy, her body surrendering to exhaustion and cold. She knew this was dangerous, that to sleep now might mean never waking, but she could not keep her eyes open any longer. Just as consciousness began to slip away, she felt it, music, a change in the air, a sudden warmth that did not come from any natural source. The wolf cub lifted its head and released a single sharp bark, the first sound it had made since birth. Sylva's eyes opened. Standing at the entrance to her hollow, silhouetted against the falling snow, was a figure, tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a cloak as black as midnight. She could not see his face, but she knew every fiber of her being new. "Abner," she breathed. The figure moved closer and the moonlight caught his features. It was him. The same sharp, beautiful face, the same medium-length black hair now dusted with snowflakes. But his eyes were different. They glowed with a deep crimson light, burning like embers in the darkness. He knelt before her and she saw something she had never seen in him before. Anguish. "Sylva," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "What have they done to you?" "They cast us out," she whispered. "The children, they feared them." Abner's gaze fell to the baby and the wolf cub. His expression shifted through a dozen emotions in seconds. Shock, wonder, pain, and finally something that looked like fierce, protective love. "A son," he murmured, "and a wolf born of my blood. I did not think it possible." "They will die out here," Sylva said, her voice breaking. "I cannot keep them warm. I have no food, no shelter. Abner, please." He reached out and touched her face with fingers that were cold as marble, yet somehow comforting. When he spoke, his voice was soft but filled with absolute certainty. "You gave me what centuries could not steal from me, a reason to exist." His crimson eyes met hers and she saw eternity in them. "I will care for all three of you. This I swear on my blood, on my name, on everything I am." Before she could respond, he gathered her into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. The baby and the wolf cub were cradled between them, safe and warm. "Where are we going?" Sylva asked. "Home," Abner said simply. "To D'Arvien Castle, where you will want for nothing, where you will be safe, where our children will grow strong. If you're enjoying the story, leave a like, a comment, and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to reply." The journey through the mountains was unlike anything Sylva had ever experienced. Abner moved through the snow-covered forest with impossible speed and grace, his steps leaving no tracks, his breath creating no mist in the frozen air. She clung to him. The baby and wolf cub pressed safely between them and watched the world blur past in streaks of white and shadow. "How is this possible?" she whispered against his chest. "You move as if the ground does not exist." "Because for me it barely does," Abner replied, his voice a low rumble she could feel through his body. "I am not bound by the same laws as mortal men, Sylva. I thought you understood this when we first met. I knew you were different," she admitted. "But I did not know what you truly were. And now that you do," he slowed his pace slightly, his crimson eyes finding hers in the darkness. "Does it terrify you?" Sylva considered this carefully. She should be afraid. Every story told in Valmir spoke of vampires as demons, as unholy creatures who fed on the blood of the innocent and commanded the forces of darkness. Father Crispin had preached countless sermons about the eternal damnation that awaited those who consorted with such beings. Yet when she looked at Abner, at the way he held their children with such careful reverence, at the pain in his eyes when he had found her dying in the snow, she felt no fear. "No," she said finally. "I am not afraid, not of you." Something shifted in his expression, a softening that made him look almost human. "Then hold tight. We are nearly there." They emerged from the forest onto a ridge overlooking a vast valley. Below, rising from the mist like a monument to forgotten ages, stood D'Arvien Castle. It was enormous, built from black stone that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. 4 towers stretched toward the sky, their peaks crowned with iron spires. Massive walls surrounded courtyards and gardens now buried beneath winter snow. Despite its imposing appearance, there was a strange beauty to it, a Gothic elegance in every arch and buttress. It has stood for over 600 years, Abner said quietly. Built by my grandfather when he first claimed these lands. It has weathered wars, plagues, and the passage of countless mortal generations, and it will stand for 600 more. He carried her down a winding path that led to an enormous gate of black iron wrought with intricate designs. Wolves and roses intertwined, symbols she did not fully understand. As they approached, the gate swung open silently, as if recognizing their master's presence. Inside, the courtyard was pristine, despite the snow. Torches burned along the walls with flames that did not flicker or smoke. Sylva realized with a start that the fire was not natural. It burned with a pale blue light that cast no warmth. Which fire? Abner explained, seeing her gaze. It requires no fuel and cannot be extinguished by wind or water. An old magic taught to me by a sorceress I once knew in the eastern lands. He carried her through a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands and into music the castle proper. The interior took her breath away. The entrance hall was vast with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. Tapestries depicting ancient battles and moonlit forests hung from the walls. A grand staircase of dark wood swept upward, splitting into 2 directions at a landing dominated by a massive stained glass window. Even in the dim light, she could see it depicted a white wolf standing beneath a blood-red moon. Your home is beautiful, Sylva whispered. Our home, Abner corrected gently. You will never leave here unless you wish to, Sylva. You and our children have my protection, my resources, and my devotion. Nothing in this world or the next will harm you while I draw breath, or whatever passes for breath in one such as me. He carried her up the stairs and through corridors lit by more of the pale witch fire. They passed rooms filled with books, chambers containing strange instruments and artifacts, and a great hall with a table that could seat 50. Finally, he brought her to a suite of rooms in the eastern tower. The bedroom was warm, genuinely warm, heated by a fireplace where real flames crackled cheerfully. A massive bed dominated the space covered in furs and silk blankets. Beside it stood a cradle of carved oak already prepared with soft linens. How did you know? Sylva asked as Abner gently placed her on the bed. How did you know to come for us? He was silent for a long moment, carefully settling the baby into the cradle while the white wolf cub curled at the foot of the bed, watching them both with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. I felt it, Abner said finally. 3 nights ago, I felt a pull, a connection I had never experienced before. It drew me back to Valmir, though music I had sworn never to return to lands so close to mortal villages. When I arrived and heard what they had done, his hands clenched into fists, and for a moment his eyes blazed brighter. Music I wanted to burn that entire village to ash, every man, woman, and child who had condemned you. But you did not, Sylva said softly. No, because you would not have wanted me to. Because our son, he gestured to the cradle, deserves better than to have his first days marked by slaughter. And because he trailed off, seemingly struggling with words. Because, Sylva prompted, because in 6 centuries of existence I have taken more lives than I can count. I have been monster, warrior, and king. I have walked through history, leaving nothing but death and shadow in my wake. And I am tired, Sylva, so very tired. He sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time she saw the weight of ages in his posture. When I met you, I felt music something I thought I had lost forever. Hope, the possibility that I could be more than what I have been. Sylva reached out and took his cold hand in her warm one. Then be more. You have already begun by saving us. A knock at the door interrupted them. Abner rose smoothly. Enter. The door opened to reveal a woman of striking appearance. She appeared to be in her 30s with silver white hair pulled back in an elegant braid and eyes of pale violet. She wore a dress of deep purple velvet and carried herself with the bearing of nobility. But there was something otherworldly about her, a quality that marked her as different from any human Sylva had known. Master, The woman said, bowing her head respectfully, "I heard you had returned with guests. Sylva, this is Myrl," Abner introduced. "She has served my family for 3 centuries. Myrl, this is Sylva Morl, the mother of my children, and she is to be treated with the same respect you would show me. Her word is law in this castle, second only to my own." Muriel's violet eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her composed exterior. "Children you have sired," she caught herself, bowing again. "Forgive me, master. I meant no disrespect. It is simply unprecedented. Many things about this situation are unprecedented," Abner said dryly. "Sylva will need care. She has just given birth and has been through an ordeal that would have killed most mortals. Prepare whatever she requires: food, medicine, warm baths, clothing. See to it personally, of course." Muriel approached the cradle and looked down at the sleeping infant. Her expression softened in a way that made her seem almost human. "He is beautiful. What is his name?" "Aren," Sylva said. "It means silver in the old tongue." "A fitting name," Muriel murmured. Then her gaze fell on the white wolf cub and she gasped. "By the old blood, is that?" "Yes," Abner confirmed. "Born at the same time as the boy. They are brothers in a sense. Both carry my blood, though in different forms." Myrl knelt beside the bed, examining the cub with wonder. "I have read of such things in the ancient texts, but I never believed. The legends speak of the first vampires, those turned under the light of the wolf moon, who carried the essence of both predator and immortal. Music, your bloodline is among the oldest, master. It seems that essence can still manifest." "What does it mean?" Sylva asked. "Will he always be a wolf, or will he grow, change, become more?" Mel finished. "The texts are unclear, but they suggest such creatures possess abilities beyond either vampire or wolf. He will be extraordinary if he survives to maturity." "He will survive," Abner said with absolute certainty. "I will ensure it." Myrl rose and bowed again. "I will prepare everything immediately. Lady Sylva, welcome to D'Arvien Castle. I hope you will find it to be a true home." After she left, Sylva looked at Abner with questions burning in her eyes. 3 centuries? She has served your family for 3 centuries. Muriel was dying when I found her, Abner explained. Accused of witchcraft, condemned to burn, I offered her a choice. Death by fire or life eternal in my service. She chose life. Music, she is not fully vampire. I gave her only enough blood to halt her aging and grant her certain abilities. She retains her magic, her humanity, and her free will. Music, there are others like her here, a few. The castle does not run itself, but all who serve me do so by choice, and all are treated fairly. I am, Music, no tyrant, Sylva. I may be a monster, but I am not cruel without cause. The first week at D'Arvien Castle passed in a haze of recovery and wonder. Sylva's body slowly healed from the trauma of childbirth and exposure. Aided by Muriel's expert care and herbal remedies that seemed far more potent than anything she had known in Valmir, the sorceress brought her warm broths infused with strength-restoring herbs, applied pices that drew out the cold that had settled in her bones, and spoke incantations in a language that sounded like wind through ancient trees. Arian thrived. The baby boy grew stronger each day, his silver eyes bright and curious, his tiny hands grasping at everything within reach. Sylva nursed him by the fire, singing old songs her mother had taught her, while the white wolf cub, whom she had named Fenrir, after the great wolf of legend, watched over them both with protective vigilance. Fenrir was growing at an unnatural rate. Within 7 days, he had doubled in size, his paws now as large as Sylva's hands, his eyes gleaming with intelligence that seemed to understand human speech. He never left Arian's side, sleeping curled around the cradle at night and following Sylva whenever she carried the baby through the castle halls. Abner came to her chambers every evening after sunset. He would sit in the chair beside the fire and watch her with an expression that mixed longing with restraint, as if he wanted to draw closer, but feared his very presence might somehow taint the domestic peace of the scene. "You do not have to keep your distance," Sylva told him on the 8th night. "You are their father, you should hold your son." Abner's crimson eyes flickered with uncertainty. "I'm afraid I might hurt him. My strength is difficult to control around such fragile things." "Music, then learn," Sylva said gently, rising and bringing Arian to him. He should know his father's touch. With infinite care, Abner took the baby in his arms. His hands, which could crush stone and rend flesh, cradled the infant with a tenderness that brought tears to Sylva's eyes. Aryan gazed up at his father and smiled. Music, a genuine toothless smile of recognition and trust. "He knows you," Sylva whispered. "He carries my blood," Abner replied, his voice rough with emotion, just as Fenrir does. "They are part of me in a way I cannot fully explain. I can feel them, Sylva. Their heartbeats echo in my own chest. Their warmth flows through veins that have been cold for centuries." It was during these quiet evenings that Abner began to share his history. He spoke of his mortal life in a time when kingdoms were smaller and the world was darker, when he had been a warrior named Abner D'Arvien, who fought in the Crusades. He described the night he had been turned, ambushed by a creature of shadow and fang while returning from the Holy Land, drained to the point of death, and then forced to drink blood that burned like molten silver. "The vampire who made me was ancient even then," Abner said, staring into the fire. Music, he called himself Valdrich the Endless. He sought to create an army of immortals to rule over the mortal kingdoms. I was to be his general, his right hand in conquest. "What happened?" Sylva asked, sitting at his feet with Fenrir's head resting in her lap. "I killed him," Abner said simply. "Not immediately. I was too weak too, but I learned. I studied. I discovered that we vampires are not invincible. We can be destroyed by sunlight, by fire, by a stake of consecrated wood through the heart, and we can be killed by each other if one is strong enough." His eyes met hers. "After 50 years of servitude, I drove a blade forged from blessed silver through Valdrich's heart while he slept. His blood gave me power beyond what most vampires ever achieve. I became what he had been, an alpha, the first of my own line." "And you have lived alone all this time?" Sylva asked softly. "Not always alone. I have had companions, lovers, allies, but they all age and die, or they betray me, or they discover what I am and flee in terror. After the first few centuries, I stopped trying to form lasting connections. It was easier to exist in solitude than to endure the endless cycle of loss." He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Until you who looked at me without fear, you who touched me without revulsion, you who gave me something I thought impossible, a family." Before Sylva could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. Myrl entered without waiting for permission, her face pale and urgent. "Master, we have visitors, 3 of them at the gate, claiming right of parley under the old laws." Abner was on his feet instantly, his entire demeanor shifting from gentle father to deadly predator. "Who are they?" "Vampires, master. One introduces himself as Lord Casimir of the Northern Reaches. The others bear his mark but do not speak." Abner's jaw tightened. "Casimir, I should have known word would spread quickly." He turned to Sylva. "Stay here. Keep the children close. Myrl, ward this room with every protection you know." "What is happening?" Sylva demanded, rising with Aryan clutched to her chest. Fenrir growled low, his hackles raised. "Casimir is an old rival," Abner explained tersely. "We have maintained an uneasy peace for decades, each ruling our own territories. But the birth of Aryan and Fenrir, it changes things. A vampire who can sire children is a threat to the established order. Others will either seek to control that power or destroy it." Fear clenched Sylva's heart. "Will he music try to take them?" "He will try," Abner said, his voice dropping to a growl that resonated with ancient fury. "And he will fail. I did not survive 6 centuries only to lose my family to ambitious fools." He strode to the door, then paused and looked back. "Trust me, Sylva. I will protect you, all of you." After he left, Myrl moved quickly around the room, producing small vials of powder and liquid from her robes. She sprinkled substances at the threshold, drew symbols on the walls with ash, and murmured incantations that made the air shimmer and hum. "What are you doing?" Sylva asked, watching the sorceress work. "Creating barriers," Myrl explained. "No vampire can cross a threshold that has been properly warded without invitation. Even if they overcome Abner, which I doubt, but one must prepare for all possibilities, they cannot reach you here. What if Abner needs help? The Master is the oldest vampire in these lands, Lady Sylva. He has survived wars, plagues, betrayals, and the passing of empires. He will survive this." Muriel finished her work and stood, wiping ash from her hands. "Besides, you heard him. You and those children are his reason to fight. A vampire with something to protect is the most dangerous creature in existence." Downstairs in the great hall, Abner stood before 3 figures cloaked in shadow. The one in the center stepped forward, pulling back his hood to reveal a face of sharp, aristocratic beauty. Lord Casimir appeared young, perhaps 30 in mortal years, music with pale blonde hair and eyes like chips of ice. He smiled, revealing fangs that gleamed in the firelight. Abner D'Arvien, music, Casimir said, his voice smooth and cultured. It has been too long, old friend. We are not friends, Abner replied coldly. State your business and be gone, such hostility. And here I came, bearing congratulations. Casimir's smile widened. Rumor has reached me that you have achieved the impossible, a vampire with children. I simply had to see for myself if the tales were true. What I do within my own domain is no concern of yours, Casimir. Music, on the contrary, it concerns all of us. You have broken fundamental laws of our nature. Some would say you have committed an abomination. Casimir circled slowly, his movements predatory. Others might see opportunity. Imagine if this ability could be studied, replicated. We could create a new generation of vampires, born rather than turned. We could build an empire that would endure forever. My children are not experiments, music, Abner said, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. They are not weapons. They are not tools for your ambition. Then what are they? Pets? Playthings? Casimir's eyes glittered with malice. You always were sentimental, Abner. It is your greatest weakness, and your arrogance is yours. Leave now while I still permit you to do so. Casimir laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You cannot simply declare this matter closed. Others will come. Some will be more persuasive than I. Give me the woman and the offspring. Let me study them in controlled conditions. In exchange, I will ensure your territory remains unmolested. No, then you choose war. Abner moved faster than mortal eyes could follow. One moment he stood 10 paces from Casimir. The next his hand was wrapped around the other vampire's throat, lifting him off the ground. I have lived through centuries of war. Abner snarled, his eyes blazing crimson. I have walked through rivers of blood and ruled over fields of corpses. If you want war, I will give it to you. But understand this, I will not stop until every vampire who threatens my family is ash and memory. Music, he released Casimir, who staggered back, clutching his throat. You will regret this, Casimir hissed. Perhaps, Abner acknowledged, but not as much as you will regret challenging me. The 3 vampires departed into the night, and Abner stood alone in the great hall, his hands still trembling with barely controlled rage. The night after Casimir's departure, Abner did not come to Sylva's chambers. She waited by the fire, Aryan sleeping peacefully in his cradle, and Fenrir restless at her feet, pacing and whining softly, as if sensing the tension that had settled over the castle like a shroud. When dawn approached, and he still had not appeared, Sylva made a decision. She wrapped Aryan in warm blankets, beckoned Fenrir to follow, and ventured out of her rooms for the first time since arriving at D'Arvien Castle. The corridors were dimly lit by the pale witch fire, casting everything in shades of blue and shadow. She passed rooms filled with ancient armor, libraries containing books whose spines bore writing in languages she had never seen, music and galleries hung with portraits of stern-faced ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow her movement. Finally, she heard voices coming from a chamber at the end of a long hallway. She recognized Abner's deep tones and Myrle's lighter voice along with others she did not know. Moving quietly, she approached the partially open door. Cannot face them all alone, master. A male voice was saying, Casimir will not return alone. He will bring others, perhaps many others. Let them come. Abner replied, his voice hard as stone. I have fortified this castle against armies before, but never while protecting such vulnerable lives, Muriel interjected gently. A human woman and 2 infants, one still nursing. They cannot be moved quickly if we need to flee. They cannot defend themselves if the wards are breached. Then the wards will not be breached. There was a pause. Then Abner's voice came again, softer and edged with something that sounded like despair. I will not lose them, Myrle. I cannot. Do you understand? For 600 years I have walked this earth feeling nothing but hunger and emptiness, and now I feel everything. Fear, hope, love, terror. It is overwhelming. If they are taken from me, they will not be, said another voice, this one female and unfamiliar. But you must accept help, Abner. You must trust others again. Sylva pushed the door open fully and stepped inside. The room was a study, lined with shelves containing scrolls, artifacts, and strange instruments. Abner stood by the window, his back to the door. Myrle sat at a large table covered in maps and documents. Beside her were two others, a tall man with dark skin and golden eyes who wore robes marked with arcane symbols, and a woman of ethereal beauty with hair like moonlight and eyes that glowed faintly silver. All conversation ceased as they turned to look at her. "Sylva," Abner said, spinning to face her. "You should be resting." "I have rested enough," she replied, music stepping into the room with Fenrir at her heels. "If we are in danger, I deserve to know the full truth. These are my children you are protecting." The moonlight-haired woman smiled approvingly. "She has spirit. This one, I like her." "Sylva, these are allies I have called upon," Abner explained, gesturing to the newcomers. Constantine, he indicated the robed man, is a scholar of vampire lore and ancient magic. He has studied our kind for over 2 centuries. And Seraphine, the woman inclined her head gracefully, is one of the oldest vampires still walking the earth. She was turned during the fall of Rome. "Nearly 1,600 years, Seraphine said, her voice musical. "And in all that time, I have never heard of a vampire siring living children. You have accomplished something truly remarkable, Abner, and terrifying." "Terrifying?" Sylva echoed, instinctively pulling Irene closer. "To those who feared change, yes," Constantine explained. "For millennia, vampires have existed under certain rules. We are sterile, music unable to create life. We can only perpetuate our kind through the turning of mortals. Your children break that fundamental law. They represent evolution, adaptation, and evolution is always seen as a threat by music those comfortable with the status quo." Seraphine approached Sylva, moving with the grace of a dancer. She looked down at Aryan with eyes that held the weight of centuries. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Sylva nodded. Seraphine gently touched the baby's forehead, and a soft silver glow emanated from her fingertips. Aryan cooped happily, reaching for the light. "Extraordinary," Seraphine breathed. "He carries Abner's vampire essence, yet his heart beats. His blood flows warm. He is alive in a way no turned vampire can ever be." Her eyes shifted to Fenrir, who had stopped pacing and sat watching her intently. "And you, little wolf, you are perhaps even more remarkable." She extended her hand toward Fenrir, and the wolf cub padded forward, sniffing cautiously. When Seraphine touched his head, the same silver glow appeared, but this time it was met with a soft white luminescence emanating from Fenrir himself. "He has awakened already," Seraphine said in wonder. "The wolf blood runs true in him. Abner, music, do you understand what this means?" "Tell me," Abner said quietly. "In the ancient times before Christianity spread across these lands, there were vampires who could take the form of great wolves. They were called the Volkadak, neither fully vampire nor fully beast, but something between. Most of that bloodline was hunted to extinction by both humans and other vampires who feared their power. But you, Abner, carry a trace of that lineage, and it has manifested in your son." Constantine stepped forward, his golden eyes gleaming with scholarly excitement. "The legends say that Volkod could move between forms, that they possess the strength of vampires and the senses of wolves, that they could command lesser beasts and speak with the voice of the wild. If Fenrir inherits these abilities, he will be hunted." Myrle finished grimly. "Every vampire who fears losing their territory to a superior predator will seek to kill him before he matures, which is why we must act decisively." Seraphine said, "Abner, I have brought you a proposition. There are still places in this world where the old laws hold sway, music where vampires gather under the protection of ancient pacts. One such place is the Court of Shadows, hidden in the mountains beyond the eastern border. If you bring your family there and petition for sanctuary, the elders may grant it." "The Court of Shadows has not recognized my authority in centuries," Abner said skeptically. "Why would they protect my offspring?" "Because Aryan and Fenrir are not just your offspring. They are potentially the future of our entire race. If a vampire can sire children naturally, it changes everything. The elders are old, Abner, old enough to value preservation of knowledge and evolution over petty territorial disputes. They will want to study the children, yes, but they will also shield them from those who would destroy them out of fear." Sylva listened to all of this with growing unease. "You speak of my children as if they are artifacts to be studied and protected by strangers. What kind of life would that be for them, locked away in some hidden court, never knowing the sun or freedom?" Seraphine's expression softened. Music understand your fear, mother, but the alternative may be worse. Casimir will return, and he will not come with just 3 vampires next time. He will bring an army. And if D'Arvien Castle falls, it will not fall, Abner said fiercely. Then you condemn yourself to eternal siege, Constantine argued. Is that what you want? To raise your children in a fortress under constant threat, never able to leave, never able to know peace? Sylva saw the conflict raging in Abner's eyes, the warrior's pride battling against a father's fear. She stepped forward and placed her free hand on his arm. What do you think we should do? She asked him quietly. He looked at her, and for a moment the ancient vampire disappeared, leaving only a man facing an impossible choice. I think I need time to consider all options. But I will not make any decision without your agreement, Sylva. They are your children as much as mine. They are our children, she corrected gently. Music and we will protect them together. A sudden crash echoed through the castle, followed by the sound of bells ringing in alarm. Myrle jumped to her feet, her hands already glowing with magical energy. The outer wards have been breached, she announced, her voice tense. Abner's fangs extended instantly, his eyes blazing crimson. How many? 12, perhaps 15 signatures, Constantine said, his hands tracing patterns in the air as he read the magical disturbances. They are moving fast, spreading out to surround the castle. The Casimir works quickly, Seraphine observed, drawing a slender sword from beneath her cloak. He must have already had forces positioned nearby. Sylva, go back to your chambers, Abner commanded. Myrle, escort her and strengthen the inner wards. Constantine, Seraphine with me. We end this now. But before anyone could move, Fenrir threw back his head and released a howl that seemed to shake the very stones of the castle. It was not the cry of a cub, but the ancient song of a great wolf, full of power and warning. And from somewhere in the darkness beyond the castle walls, other howls answered. Seraphine's eyes widened. Impossible. There are no wolf packs in these mountains. There were none yesterday. Constantine agreed, moving to the window. But look, they all crowded to the window and saw them. Dozens of wolves emerging from the forest, their eyes glowing in the darkness. White wolves, gray wolves, black wolves, all converging on the castle, forming a living barrier between the walls and the approaching vampire forces. Fenrir is calling them, Sylva whispered in awe. He is protecting his home. Abner stared at his wolf son with a mixture of pride and wonder. The legends were true. The Falkadlack blood runs strong indeed. The castle erupted into controlled chaos. Abner moved with the precision of a seasoned commander, barking orders that sent servants scurrying to secure doors and windows, while Muriel and Constantine reinforced magical barriers throughout the fortress. Seraphine stood at the window, her ancient eyes tracking the movements of the vampire forces as they tested the perimeter, probing for weaknesses. They are organized, she reported, military formations. Casimir has brought experienced warriors, not merely ambitious fledglings. Then they will die with more skill than most, Abner replied coldly. He turned to Sylva, his expression softening despite the imminent violence. Please go to the inner sanctum. It is the most heavily fortified room in the castle. Nothing can reach you there. I will not hide while you fight for our family. Sylva protested. You will, because if something happens to me, you must survive to protect Arian and Fenrir. Promise me, Sylva. Promise me you will not be foolishly brave. The urgency in his voice, the raw fear beneath the command, made her nod reluctantly. I promise, but you must promise to return to us. He pulled her close, pressing his cold lips to her forehead. I have survived 6 centuries of war. I do not intend to fall tonight. Myrle appeared at the doorway. My lady, please, we must go now. Reluctantly, Sylva allowed herself to be led away, carrying Arian while Fenrir followed, his white fur bristling with tension. They descended into the depths of the castle, past wine cellars and storage rooms, until they reached a massive iron door engraved with protective symbols that glowed faintly blue. Muriel placed her palm against the metal and spoke a word in the old tongue. The door swung inward, revealing a circular chamber lit by floating orbs of soft light. The walls were lined with shelves containing books, supplies, weapons, and various artifacts. In the center stood a bed, a table, and several comfortable chairs. This sanctum was built by Abner's grandfather, Muriel explained as she ushered Sylva inside. It has withstood sieges that lasted months. The walls are 3 ft of solid stone, reinforced with iron and blessed with protective enchantments. No vampire can enter without Abner's explicit permission. "What about you?" Sylva asked as she settled Aryan into a makeshift crib that Myrle quickly prepared. "I am bound to the castle and its master by blood and oath. The protections recognize me as friend, not foe." Muriel began arranging defensive items around the room. Vials of holy water, stakes of consecrated wood, silver daggers, but I will teach you how to use these just in case. Above them, the battle began. Abner stood in the great courtyard, flanked by Seraphine and Constantine. Behind them, a dozen of his most trusted servants, some human, some turned, all loyal beyond question, formed defensive positions. Before them, beyond the wall of wolves that Fenrir had summoned, stood Casimir and his forces. The Northern Lord had indeed brought an army, 15 vampires of varying ages and power, all armed with weapons designed to kill their own kind. Silver blades, stakes of ash wood blessed by corrupted priests, and vials of fire that burned with supernatural heat. "This is your final chance, Abner," Casimir called out, his voice carrying across the snowy courtyard. "Surrender the woman and the abominations, and I will allow you to keep your castle and your territory. Refuse, and I will reduce this place to rubble and ash." "You are welcome to try," Abner replied, his voice calm and deadly. "But know that I have sent word to allies throughout the region. By dawn, you will be surrounded by forces that make your little war band look like children playing at battle." It was a bluff, but delivered with such confidence that several of Casimir's vampires exchanged uncertain glances. Casimir laughed, though it sounded forced. "Always the strategist, but I have planned for this as well. My allies, even now, march on those who might come to your aid. You are alone, Abner D'Arvien, alone and outnumbered." "He is not alone," Seraphine said, stepping forward. Her voice rang with authority that came from 16 centuries of existence. "I stand with him, and any who wish to challenge the vampire of Rome should consider their mortality carefully." A ripple of fear passed through Casimir's forces. Seraphine's reputation was legendary even among vampires. She had survived the fall of empires, outlasted countless rivals, and was rumored to possess powers that defied explanation. "One ancient relic will not change the outcome," Casimir sneered, but his confidence had wavered. "Then add music one more to your calculations," Constantine said, his hands beginning to glow with golden light. "I am Constantine the Enlightened, scholar of the old ways and master of blood magic. I have forgotten more about destroying vampires than you have learned in your pitiful century of existence." Casimir's face twisted with rage. "Enough talk. Take them." His forces surged forward and met the wall of wolves. The pack that Fenrir had summoned fought with supernatural coordination, as if guided by a single mind. They did not attack the vampires directly, knowing instinctively that such creatures were beyond their ability to kill. Instead, they harried and hindered, snapping at legs, forcing the vampires to slow their advance, creating opportunities for the defenders. Abner moved like liquid shadow, his speed far surpassing that of the younger vampires. His blade, forged from meteoric iron and blessed in the blood of his own creator, sang through the air, severing heads and piercing hearts with surgical precision. 2 vampires fell before Casimir's forces. Even music reached the courtyard proper. Seraphine fought with the grace of a dancer and the efficiency of an executioner. She wielded twin daggers of silver, moving between opponents so quickly that they barely saw her before the blades found their marks. Her ancient blood gave her strength that few could match. Constantine remained in the center of the courtyard, his hands weaving complex patterns in the air. Where he pointed, blood rose from fallen enemies and formed barriers of crimson crystal, shields that deflected attacks and walls that separated foes from allies. His magic was both beautiful and terrible to behold, but Casimir's forces were numerous and motivated by greed. They pressed forward, willing to sacrifice themselves for the chance at capturing the children who represented such unprecedented power. One vampire broke through the defensive line, sprinting toward the castle entrance where he believed the woman and children would be. Abner saw the movement from the corner of his eye and started to pursue. But 3 enemies blocked his path, forcing him to engage. "Seraphine," he roared. The ancient vampire understood immediately. She disengaged from her own combat and flew, literally lifted into the air by sheer force of will, intercepting the intruder mere feet from the doorway. Her daggers found his heart and throat simultaneously, and he crumbled to ash before he could scream. In the sanctum below, Sylva heard the sounds of battle filtering through layers of stone, crashes, roars, the screaming of metal against metal. Fenria paced restlessly, whining and scratching at the door, clearly wanting to join the fight, but unable to leave his brother and mother unprotected. Irian strangely did not cry. The baby lay in his makeshift crib, eyes wide and alert, as if he could sense the violence above and understood in some primal way that he must remain silent. Myrle stood guard at the door, her hands glowing with magical energy. "They will prevail," she told Sylva, though her voice held more hope than certainty. "The master has survived worse. How long have you served him?" Sylva asked, needing music distraction from her fear. 283 years, Muriel replied. "I was 27 when he found me, condemned to burn for the crime of knowing too much about herbs and healing. He offered me a choice, and I chose to live. I have never regretted it. Do you love him?" Muriel smiled sadly. "Not in the way you mean. I love him as one loves a savior, a teacher, a complicated brother. He gave me purpose and protected me from a world that would have destroyed me. But I have always known his heart belonged elsewhere. First to grief and solitude, and now finally to you." Above, the tide of battle began to turn. Casmir's forces, depleted and demoralized by the ferocity of the defense, started to falter. The Northern Lord himself engaged Abner directly, music their blades clashing in a blur of supernatural speed. "You cannot win this," Abner said as their swords locked. "Withdraw now, and I will spare those who remain." "Never," Casimir snarled. "Your abominations will die and your bloodline will end." He struck with desperate music fury, but Abner had been fighting wars when Casimir was still mortal and mewing in his cradle. Every attack was anticipated, every opening exploited. Within moments, Abner had disarmed his opponent and driven him to his knees. "I gave you a chance for mercy," Abner said quietly, his blade at Casimir's throat. "You chose pride and ambition instead." "Do it then," Casimir spat. "Kill me and make yourself the villain in the eyes of every vampire in the region. They will unite against you. You will never know peace." Abner hesitated. Killing Casimir would indeed make him a target, would invite endless retaliation and conflict. But allowing him to live meant the threat would never truly end. Before he could decide, a voice rang out across the battlefield, ancient, powerful, and commanding. Enough. Every vampire froze. Even the wolves fell silent. From the darkness beyond the courtyard emerged a figure wrapped in robes of deepest black, a hood concealing its face. But the aura of power radiating from this newcomer was undeniable, suffocating, absolute. "The Court of Shadows has heard of this conflict," music the figure announced. "We have come to render judgment." Seraphine bowed her head respectfully. Constantine fell to one knee. Even Abner, proudest of all, acknowledged the authority of this presence with a slight inclination of his head. The hooded figure glided forward music until it stood between Abner and Casimir. "The children born of vampire and mortal shall be protected under the ancient laws. Any who seek them harm will answer to the elders themselves. This is our decree." Casimir's face went white with shock and fury. "You cannot silence." The single word carried such weight that Casimir's jaw snapped shut involuntarily. "You have violated sacred law by attacking during parley, by threatening offspring, by disturbing the balance. Your punishment is exile. You will wander the frozen wastes for 1 century, feeding only on beasts denied the comfort of civilization. Perhaps then you will learn humility." With a gesture, the figure banished Casimir into the night. The Northern Lord's screams faded into the distance, carried by supernatural winds. The hooded figure turned to Abner. "And you, Abner D'Arvien, have been granted sanctuary. But know this, sanctuary comes with price. The court will call upon you when the time comes, and you will answer." "I understand," Abner said quietly. The figure nodded and began to fade like mist in sunlight. "Protect them well. They are more important than you yet realize." Then it was gone, leaving only silence and the aftermath of battle. 3 years passed. The seasons turned over D'Arvien Castle in their eternal cycle, painting the mountains in spring green, summer gold, autumn crimson, and winter white. The scars of battle faded from the courtyard stones, and life, true life, not merely undead existence, flourished within the ancient walls. Sylva stood in the castle's eastern garden, music watching her children play in the fading light of afternoon. Aryan, now a sturdy 3-year-old with hair as black as his father's music and eyes that shifted between silver and the faintest hint of crimson, laughed as he chased butterflies through the herb beds she had planted. His movements were faster than any mortal child's, his strength already remarkable, but his heartbeat warm, and his laughter rang with pure innocent joy. Beside him ran Fenrir, no longer a small cub, but a massive white wolf, music larger than any natural beast with eyes that gleamed with intelligence beyond animal cunning. The wolf moved with Aryan as naturally as a shadow, protective yet playful, brother and guardian in one magnificent form. They grow so fast, Muriel said, appearing at Silverside with a basket of freshly harvested lavender. The sorceress had become more than a servant. She was family now, a trusted advisor and beloved aunt to the children. Too fast, Sylva agreed, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. Sometimes I wonder if we are ready for what comes next. Muriel followed her gaze and smiled knowingly. Another child. Abner must be overjoyed. Terrified is more accurate. Sylva laughed, though he hides it behind his stoic warrior facade. He fears he will somehow fail them, that his nature will corrupt them or bring them harm. The master has changed more in 3 years than in 3 centuries before. Mel observed. Love has made him vulnerable. Yes, but it has also made him stronger, more human paradoxically than when he was mortal. It was true. Abner D'Arvien, the vampire alpha who had once ruled his domain with cold efficiency and kept all others at arm's length, had transformed into something unexpected, a devoted father and husband. He spent his evenings reading stories to Aryan, teaching the boy languages both living and dead. He trained with Fenrir in the courtyard, helping the young Volkadlak master the shifting between wolf and human form that had begun to manifest in recent months. And with Sylva, he had found a partnership that transcended the boundaries of mortal and immortal, human and vampire. Their love had deepened with time, becoming something that neither could fully explain, but both trusted absolutely. Mama, Mama. Aryan came running, music clutching something in his small fist. Look what Fenrir found. He opened his hand to reveal a smooth stone marked with ancient runes. Fenrir, music having shifted partially into his human form, that of a young boy with white hair and wolf-gold eyes, stood beside his brother, grinning proudly. It was buried by the old oak tree, Fenrir said, his voice carrying an otherworldly quality. It feels old, important. Muriel took the stone and examined it carefully. Her expression shifted from curiosity to amazement. This is a protection ward from the First Age before even the Romans came to these lands. It has been dormant for millennia, waiting for someone with the right bloodline to awaken it. She looked at the 2 boys with wonder. You found it because the magic recognized you. Both of you carry blood that traces back to the very dawn of our kind. What does it do? Aryan asked, his silver eyes wide with curiosity. It strengthens the bonds between family, Muriel explained. It ensures that those who love each other music can always find their way back to one another, no matter how great the distance or how dark the night. Like how I always know where Papa is, Aryan asked. Exactly like that. Your connection to your father is already strong because you share his blood. This stone will extend that protection to all of your family, including the new brother or sister growing in your mother's womb. Aryan's eyes went impossibly wide. There's a baby inside Mama. Sylva laughed and knelt down to embrace her son. Yes, my darling. By spring you will have a little brother or sister to play with. Fenrir tilted his head thoughtfully. Will it be human or wolf? We will love it either way, Sylva said firmly, ruffling the white-haired boy's head. Just as we love both of you. As evening descended and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Abner emerged from the castle. He had spent the day in council with Seraphine and Constantine, who had become permanent residents of D'Arvien, forming an alliance that had brought stability to the region. Other vampires now thought twice before challenging the combined might of 3 ancient bloodlines united in common cause. Abner's eyes found his family immediately, and his stern expression melted into something warm and tender. He crossed the garden in swift strides and gathered Sylva into his arms, mindful of her pregnancy, then knelt to embrace his sons. How were your lessons today? He asked Aryan. I can count to 100 in Latin, music the boy announced proudly. And Fenrir learned how to track a deer through the forest without being seen. Well done, both of you. Abner's gaze shifted to Fenrir. Are you maintaining control of the transformation? No accidental shifts. Only twice this week, Fenrir admitted, but both times I changed back quickly. I am getting better, father. The word father spoken by both boys so naturally never failed to move Abner. He had once believed himself incapable of such bonds, condemned by his nature to eternal isolation. Now he had everything he had never dared to dream of. That night after the children were asleep, Aryan in his bed with Fenrir curled in wolf form at the foot of it. Abner and Sylva stood together on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the moonlit mountains. The Court of Shadows sent another message, Abner said quietly. They wish to meet Irene and Fenrir on their FTH birthday. They want to assess what powers the boys may develop as they mature. And you trust them? Sylva asked, leaning against his chest. No, but I respect their authority, and they have kept their word about protecting us. Music, as long as they make no demands that endanger our children, I will honor the agreement. He paused. Seraphine has agreed to accompany us when the time comes. She has more influence with the elders than I do. 2 more years, Sylva murmured. 2 years of peace before we must face that challenge. We will face it together, Abner said, his arms tightening around her, as we have faced everything else. Sylva turned in his embrace to look up at his face, beautiful and terrible, human and monster, her beloved in all his complexity. Do you regret it? The life you had before, the freedom to move through the world without attachments, without the constant fear of losing those you love. Abner considered the question seriously, as he always did with her. I regret nothing, he said finally. The centuries before you were existence, not life. I moved through time without purpose, accumulating power and knowledge but never understanding why. Now I know. Everything I was, everything I survived, every dark deed and lonely night, it all led me to you. To them, to this. He pressed his cold lips to her forehead, and she felt the depth of his devotion in that simple gesture. I was cast out once, Sylva whispered, remembering that terrible night in Valmir, stumbling through the snow with 2 newborn impossibilities in her arms. Alone and certain I would die, and then you came. You whispered that you would care for all 3 of us, and you have kept that promise every day since. I will keep it for eternity, Abner vowed. No force in heaven or hell will take you from me. Music, no enemy will harm our children. This I swear on my blood, music on my name, on everything I am. Inside the nursery, Aryan stirred in his sleep, dreaming of adventures yet to come. Fenrir lifted his head, sensing his parents' emotions through the bond they all shared, then settled back down with a contented rumble, and in Sylva's womb, a new life grew. Another miracle, another impossibility, another testament to the power of love to transcend the boundaries between mortal and immortal, human and vampire, natural and supernatural. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across D'Arvien Castle. In the mountains beyond, wolves howled in recognition of their young prince. In hidden courts and ancient halls, vampires whispered of the children who would change everything. And in the village of Valmir, far below in the valley, people told stories of the witch who had been cast out and the demon who had claimed her. Tales that grew more fantastic with each telling. Music never knowing the truth was far more beautiful than their darkest imaginings. Abner D'Arvien, vampire alpha, first of his line, and Lord of D'Arvien, stood with his mortal wife beneath the stars and felt something he had not known in 600 years of existence. Complete and utter peace. The future held challenges, certainly. The Court of Shadows would make their demands. Other enemies would rise. The children would face prejudice and fear from both mortals and immortals alike. But they would face it together, a family forged not by tradition or expectation, but by choice and love and the fierce determination to protect what mattered most. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The story of Sylva Morl and Abner D'Arvien had begun with rejection and exile, with impossible births and desperate flight through frozen wilderness. But it had become something greater. A tale of transformation, of finding home in the most unexpected place, of love that defied death itself. As dawn approached, that dangerous time for vampires when the sun threatens to burn away the night, Abner led Sylva back inside to their chambers where darkness was safe and eternal. But he no longer feared the light the way he once had because he had learned that even in the deepest darkness, Love could kindle a flame that no shadow could extinguish. And that was the greatest magic of all. If you like the story, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell me what impressed you most about it. Turn on notifications to always receive updates on future videos.